So good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. Quick administrative note: you don't get the good little toys if you sit in the back. You got to come and fill at the front. But worth a try. You can get a toy later. Thanks very much for inviting me and having me speak today. My name is Beharry Lall. It's a little bit of a tricky name, but it's my problem, not yours. I'll be talking today on information governance and the whole theme of moving things from sort of the back room and more into the boardroom. How do we get the executive attention? It's going to sort of be a conversation going through a little bit of interesting information and tidbits I've gathered from, again, a number of years in the industry, but more importantly, looking at folks like AIM and Gartner and Forrester and kind of what those folks have to say, some echoes of what Cheryl had to say, and we're hopefully going to get to a point as we sort of turn the corner and look at some of the changes we're seeing in the industry, go through a few case studies and look at how organizations are starting to present information governance benefits in a more sort of boardroom executive-ish manner. So with that said, let's get her rolling. So start off by sort of thematically looking at what's going on in the industry and maybe some of the challenges or problems that we face. So I mean, we start off with the information governance reference model, and you know what I've noticed across the last dozen or so conferences, it seems to be missing in action. Even if I look around at the last proceedings for the last 48 hours or so, it hasn't showed up a lot. It's not something that seems to be permeating the industry. And it's not necessarily that it's good or bad. I mean, that's a whole separate debate. But the notion that we started off this journey looking at, business and security and IT and risk, those issues seem to be disappearing one by one. So we kind of shade over the business issues. We pass legal into e-discovery. We're left more and more with the notion that maybe information governance kind of becomes just records and information management. So we start to see this interesting parallel where it was RIM, and then it wasn't RIM, it was IG, and then it's kind of shifting back. So I'm seeing this little interesting turning of tides. Is that good? Is that bad? We're going to sort of explore that in the context of getting, again, that business traction. When we talk to Gartner, their comment is that there's still a lot of trouble. And you can sort of read the quote, but most organizations still struggle. They still neglect their data. They still keep everything buried. They still have trouble organizing and managing their information. And the big challenge is at the bottom here, you need to change people's attitudes toward information and the relevance to business outcomes. And that's really what we're going to be looking at today, is more and more of that business value. So it's interesting, and this is one of a number of surveys. This one happens to be sourced from the guys at AIM, talking about the information governance drivers. So you've probably seen some version of this, whether it's from AIM or IGI or Forrester that Cheryl was just presenting. And we see the standard things. People are looking for compliance, preventing data losses, making things searchable, reducing storage space. Probably fairly familiar to most of you, probably something that is common. The challenge that I throw at you, and right or wrong, I don't know if this is the right set of goals. So I look at this, and this was the Forrester one, so you might recognize this from Cheryl's presentation. I kind of go, well, this is what the organization, the CEOs, the CIOs, the folks at the top, this is what they're driving at. They're looking at how do I grow my revenues? How do I improve experience? How do I reduce costs? These two are very different kind of charts. They're talking a different language. And I look down here, way at the bottom, I get to accelerate digital business. But even when I think, if you drill into what that means from an executive perspective, it's not the same as what it means from an IG perspective. So I start to wonder if we're actually on completely different pages, and this is part of why we're having a struggle. So we talk about let's make the committee bigger, and let's expand our reach, and let's get the stakeholder. Yes, but we're still not on the same page. We're not fundamentally talking about the same kind of issues. I took a look at, from a different, so that was looking at the goals and objectives of programs. I started thinking about kind of the people. Who are in these organizations? Who's running the show, who's not running the show, who's the leader, who's on the team. These are the kind of roles that we often see at events like this. This was actually taken from a very similar event in the demographics of the attendee base. So you start to see, there's going to be a VP litigation, maybe there's a head of a governance committee, maybe there's a general counsel. But I start to look at your more traditional org chart. It's not premised. I mean, this is our universe, but in sort of the corporate world, it tends to be more functionally based. There's a head of production. There's someone in charge of marketing. There's folks in charge of sales. And the problem is we're not connecting those dots. We're not building those bridges to speak the language. So we're not bringing in the HR managers into these kind of conferences. We're not bringing the VP of marketing into the storyline. And it's not just about getting them on the committee to sit for a meeting. It's about actually building those bridges, having them lead a lot of projects. We're starting to see a little bit of a transition at Adlib where a lot of our successful deployments in the last 6 to 12 months or so have actually been led out of very different groups that shouldn't technically be leading them. So they're coming to us from project sponsors who are business unit owners or line of business managers. They're a project lead with a specific mandate, and they don't give a darn about records and information management or information. So we're starting to see this shift from, IG should be doing this stuff, but it seems to me that it's starting to come out from the business unit. So they need it, they're hungry for it, they have to achieve these goals, but they're sort of bypassing, and that's part and parcel of, I think, when Cheryl talks about the cloud and the idea of simplicity and customer centricity and end user behavior patterns. This is all part and parcel of what we're seeing out there. Even when and again, you saw this slide earlier, the notion of who are we hiring? So yeah, I mean, there's the none issue and the fact that everyone's budget is frozen. But I look at the kind of people that we're hiring. These are all very technical specialists, RIM professionals, scanning and imaging folks, archivists, again, a little hard to read, but you'll remember the slide from earlier. Way down here at 6% is business analysts. The one role that could actually start to connect the dots between the folks that have the money, that run the business, that have the power, let's say, and the information governance objective that we're trying to achieve. Those are the ones that can connect the dots, and we seem to be missing that opportunity. Again, I throw at you a lot of little different sort of disparate dots that I'm starting to connect in my head, that I'm starting to see as a bit of a theme that we're starting to hear from customers. It's not that I know the magic answer, but it's simply to say these are some of the challenges, and these might explain why it is that we're having such a hard time moving this thing forward, moving the needle forward on information governance. I've gone to a number of different conferences over the last few years, and the consistent theme is that this angst and concern and upset within the IG or RIM community that talks to the idea that they're not getting attention. I mean, that was one of Forrester's slides. The degree to which IG professionals are able to get traction with your CEOs, your CIO, your CXOs. It's just not getting there fast enough. I think this starts to explain some of the reasons why. So ultimately, we're yelling at each other. We're talking different language. We're on different pages. We're looking at different goals. We're hiring different people with different skill sets, and they're not sort of able to cross the borders. We need to ultimately get to a point where we're starting to move the boardroom type conversations up and maybe put the backroom conversations down a notch. So, some of these, I think it's less about the actual, objective or end goal or deployment option. It's more just how we talk about things. So, a classic example is this idea of classification for policy versus classification for business purpose. This is a classic scenario where, again, information governance RIM professionals tend to think in terms of categorization classification. Is it a record? Is it not a record? Is it internal or external? All critical, important things. All number one, number two goals when you look at an IG professional's day in the life of. But from a business perspective, from a marketing manager, from a VP sales, from the operations lead, that's not what they're thinking about. They think about classification for business purposes. So how can we start to bridge the gap? How can we start to take our skill set collectively to understand information, look at the unstructured and structured content, analyze that stuff, build it out in a way that is organized, structured, findable, manageable, etc. How can we now apply that standard process that we all do into new context, right? So we start to look at other ones, customer processing or contract intelligence versus more traditional things about PII identification or e-discovery. Forrester made an interesting point earlier on, the idea of PII, so personally identifiable information. Again, from an IG perspective or even a RIM perspective, we think about that almost as an ends to its own, right? So we want to identify this personal information because we need to do that, because it's compliancy, it has risk, it has problems for the organization. Now we're starting to spin that around and starting to say, no, actually, it's not about identifying private information. It's about building trust to increase market share. Right? That's a very different kind of discussion. Right? So we're not just identifying private information because we have to, because the government told us or the policy said so. We're doing it because the organization wants to gain the trust of customers to build our business. Dear marketing manager, what does that sound like to you? Right? So it's a very different kind of an appeal. So change is afoot. So again, we're starting to see lots of different things happening in organizations. We're starting to see this shift or this conflict between business and IG. But it's not like it's a dead-end story. It's not that this is becoming problematic and information governance is going the way of the dodo. Quite the opposite. We are starting to see a lot of really exciting changes in the industry. We're starting to see vendors change their messaging. We're starting to see customers become more and more engaged and involved. We're starting to see these committees broaden out. And we're starting to see conferences like this have the discussions, right? Certainly this conversation, the stuff that Forrester was talking about, and any number of different conversations I've seen, over the last 3 or 4 conferences have talked to how do you build a committee? Who are your stakeholders? How do you move up the ladder? So it's happening. Change is there. I want to share a couple examples. I'm going to start with some industry sort of thought leadership type examples, and then I'm going to drill into some specific customer case studies examples to start showing you how the industry is shifting. So our first example is from an organization called Harvey Spencer Associates. They are specialists in the area of capture technologies. And they often talked about, wave 1 versus wave 2, and this is classic sort of information governance type discussion. So they look at batch scan versus multi-channel. Multi-channel capture is all about, can I use my phone to capture things? How am I using the Internet of Things to capture? But now he's starting to look at the business process automation side of things. So it's no longer just, no longer enough to say, can I optimize my capture methodologies or techniques? Can I, get 10,000 documents scanned an hour versus 15,000 documents scanned? Can I, improve the rate at which you, do your zonal OCR? Can you automate the degree to which you can ICR signatures? There's all sorts of technical things, and they are critical. Make no mistake, they are critical. But when you start to talk about business process automation, now this is where we start to bridge the gap, and we start to move from, again, those backroom conversations into more and more of the boardroom type discussions. I see a similar thing happening with the information from Gartner. So we talked about Forrester, we talked about AIM, we talked about Gartner. We got to cover everybody. So Gartner looks at a new area called file analytics. Again, this is a technology, just like capture. And if you looked at their sort of market guide to file analysis a year ago, it simply said file analytics is a technology. Period, end of story. It doesn't really need things. That's it. But again, we're starting to see this shift from technology into application. So this year's 2016 guide was just released. And what we're starting to see is a shift where, it used to be all about efficiency and optimization. And now we're starting to see this blowout where there are other areas. There's risk mitigation, governance, policy and management, and analytics. So we're starting to see this build out where we see, all the different vendors. And yeah, vendors can play in multiple areas. Certainly Adlib plays a little bit in analytics, and I'll show a story in a second. We touch on efficiency. But we're starting to see that, these guys are more prone towards risk mitigation, governance, compliance. They're having an application. Right? So we start to shift from just what is the technology, capture, file analytics, any number of, ECM is a technology. There's a number of different vendors outside. We're starting to shift into what is the application. All right, and that's the beginning, I think, of a storyline that leads you more and more towards the board. Even our own little example. So that if you pass by the booth, we have our little Adlib Elevate storyline. And being a typical tech company, I'll criticize ourselves a little bit. We have our content elevation process, and there's a number of different steps and stages from a technical perspective that allow us to do some really cool things in terms of analyzing and optimizing the content. But in the last 6 months or so, we've started to redefine how we position ourselves. So we've started to talk about more and more of these business challenges and less about the technology. So we're starting to have better conversations with customers around things like content migration, digital transformation, privacy and security. So we're starting. Now, let's be clear, we're not there yet. Just like the Harvey Spencer example and the Gartner example, we still have a long ways to go. And by the way, I'm kind of the one that has to do a lot of that stuff, so I have a long way to go in terms of shifting even this conversation into how does that impact the bottom line? How does something like classification, again, tie into classification for business purposes? How does that increase customer satisfaction? How does something like compliancy not just mitigate risk or remove the auditors, but how does compliancy increase time to market, right? How does something like content migration, Again, it's less about, oh, well, we're going to get a better system, it'll be more efficient, and if we move from Documentum to OpenText, or OpenText to Documentum, depending on who's buying who, if we do that, that's great, but no one cares. What they're interested in is, oh, can you improve the collaboration of my teams by 20%? That's an interesting discussion, right? So we're starting to shift the conversation. We're getting better, we're still not there. So what we're seeing across the industry is this notion that we're moving along sort of a continuum as I see it. We start talking about challenges. Maybe we can start to do a better job of aligning the challenge discussion. So it's no longer just the IG traditional challenges and goals and the top 10 list. We're starting to look at business challenges, business objectives. We start to shift in technology. Technology is still going to be there. That's not going away. But the question is, how do we shift from technology into application discussions? How do you apply that technology to solve different problems? We then move into benefits. How do you start to get, and again, a lot of these are traditional benefits. They're your operational efficiency type things. But ultimately, what we really want to get to is that end goal around business value. Right, so how do we move up this ladder? How do we move up the chain of events to the point where information governance is now seen as a key stakeholder at the business table? So I'd almost argue that it might be less about building out the committee, gathering the extra players, and finding your stakeholders. That's important. But it might be a shift where maybe IG actually needs to be on their committee as opposed to them being on our committee. Something to think about. Okay, so I think we've got, oh yeah, we're good. I wanted to give a couple examples of some customer case studies that we've gone through in the last little while. And I'm not going to sort of read through there. I think the slides will be provided afterwards. But just to give you a sense, and again, I'll make fun of ourselves because it's easy. I'm Canadian. We have a self-effacing sense of humor. So we'll make fun of ourselves. So we have our standard case studies. And we talk about, this one is an oil and gas company. So they've got lots of things called well logs, which are really complicated documents. They're unstructured content. It's significantly unstructured and very hard to read. So we've got a great story about how, we did high volumes of classification, and we have a rules engine that allow the company to support classification. We have a tool that ensures consistency and objectivity when analyzing the information. And we did a good job. We improved their deduplication by about 80%. We improved their classification from about 0 to a significantly high value. But the big point is trying to move away from this discussion about metadata and full text search, which is important, but trying to ladder on this next idea of business value. So what did the customer get out of this? It was an ability to understand potential asset reutilization. So basically, they're going back to these oil wells, and they're trying to re-drill for oil because technologies have changed, drilling is getting more efficient. They can go back to those oil wells, get more oil, make more money. They can only do that if they understand their underlying content. So this story becomes, yes, about classification, deduplication, finding information, aligning it to project codes, aligning it to specs, capture is part of it. But it's so much more. It's allowing that company to take those assets and reuse those assets for greater business productivity. Another example in the insurance sector. And again, standard stuff. We work with a large European reinsurance company. And we did a lot of work, this happened to be with contracts, standardizing their content into PDFs. Some of you heard Duff Johnson speak yesterday about the power of PDFs and their applicability. So we do a lot of work in that area. We provide advanced recognition, so that's a lot of OCRing, ICRing, zonal, et cetera, et cetera. Scaling the information load, so again, a very technical type benefit. But ultimately, what's really interesting is when we start to look at what do we do with that. Now that we've optimized the information, well, in this case, we actually worked with IBM, and what we're able to do is improve the organization's ability to identify and act on trends, pricing, and making better decisions. So this kind of conversation shifts the goal from a typical technical sale into a much higher order sale that starts to hint at a CIO, CEO level. Now, this still is not a perfect description. There's some information that can't be shared quite yet, but this needs to even be tweaked, because now what we really need to get into is, so what? So when you reduce when you optimize your pricing and you acted on those trends, did the business increase 20%? Did it increase 30%? Did sales go up? Did sales go down? What did you do with that information? So we're getting better. We're still got some room to go. A quick one on pharmaceutical sector. So we've been doing lots of work in life sciences for decades now, and it's all been around sort of drug submissions. So anyone in the pharmaceutical industry? Anyone dealing with the FDA? Okay, so you're probably familiar with submissions and the procedures thereof. One of our jokes is that, and this came from our pharma customers, not from us, is that it's sometimes more difficult to submit the actual information to the FDA than it is to do the drug discovery. So it's a bogged down, laborious, paper-intensive, process-intensive, information-intensive kind of process. So you have to create these submissions packages. They have to be done just right to the FDA specs. And we help with that. We're one of the few vendors that can help create what we call submission-ready PDFs. So there's a lot of fussiness within the FDA scenario. We need to do our bit to reduce their reduce the review cycles, creating error-free submissions, reducing cost, reducing risk. So those are your standard IG kind of words. But what we're starting to see is our customers talking more and more about the business value of actually getting to market faster. So it's not just that they have a better PDF, or that they submit it quicker, or that it's error-free, or that it's more robust, or that it has hyperlinks and coloration and margins and this, that, and the other. It's really that they're able to bring drugs to market faster. And there's a number of different industry stats, but customers have told us that they estimate, again, depending on the drug, about $1 million per day worth of delays, and they estimate that they can gain about 2 days per submission if they avoid these sort of errors and rejections from reprocessing. So again, we're starting to talk more and more in their language. I'll do a little final one here. I want to share a video that came to us from one of our Australian customers, and I'll have him do it in his words, if I can make this thing work, and share with you kind of how he's talking about information governance and the benefits thereof.
IAG has received, I think, in the order of 10,000 claims in the last few days that affecting our customers. So it's that type of example that's sort of vital to us as a digital business to be able to really support our customers in this time of need. You might have noted that I am from IAG's digital labs function. We also have a customer labs function. We also have the mainstreams of our business. But it really is resetting the way the business organises itself and operates. And it's fundamental as part of everything we're doing. And we are swamped with documents every day. It is the lifeblood of our business, and much of the information that we work with is both structured and unstructured. The unstructured piece really being the tip of the iceberg. We get so much in the form of the emails and attachments from our broker community, but also our customers. We're also seeing an upswing in, I guess, our online digital channels, information being submitted directly, which is better than email, but we accept that email is going to be fundamental to the way we operate and the way our customers engage with us for at least the foreseeable future. Roughly 90 to 95% of all our inbound correspondence comes as email. So we've designed this platform, this digital platform, to service both those really intensive needs, but also our mainstream business. Recognising that email was so central, I guess, to our inbound engagement with customers, we worked with, I reached out to Adlib and said, look, I've explored your product. Looks like you have a really compelling modern architecture. Have you got something that will talk to Exchange? Because to give you an idea, a typical day for CGU in our claims business might see something like 10,000 emails coming in every day. So we had to solve that problem. We didn't want people to be printing out emails or copying and pasting and doing manual tasks that not only didn't satisfy our compliance requirements, but also just didn't give us the speed. So in terms of that partnership, and I'm sorry it's dropped off the page there, we worked with Adlib to establish effectively a key part of our digital mailroom is the Adlib capability. And we really wouldn't have had the success that we'd had that component not been available to us. So that was very much a joint venture, if you like, a partnership where we were contributing IP into that sort of co-innovation exercise. And it has been quite central to where we've come from in terms of the initial claims implementation, but every successive implementation since. We saw that from the time that our inbound correspondence was coming in to the time that it was registered and available, and prompting claims users to action was the time from receipt to action went from, I guess, the days that I talked about earlier. The median time was around 3 to 4 minutes. So that's a fairly substantial change in terms of just the effectiveness of our people, but also the customer experience was massively improved. So that's like a step change. And really, we wouldn't have been able to do that had we not had that connector from Adlib.
So that's one of our customers in Australia, looking at sort of an insurance story, and we had there's a full sort of 25-minute presentation available on our website, but I wanted to share just a few minute snippets of sort of how he talks about things. And again, that was for a technical conference, so that was an Australian content management type summit. So he's got some technical things, but you'll notice near the end, he really starts to phase into more of a discussion about how they were able to, again, reduce throughput times, not for the processing of information in and of itself, but for their actual claims operators to take action. So going from the days to the minutes scenario, that's not about the technology. Yes, there's a lot of technical things, and he goes through some of that, but it ultimately is more about how his claims operators, claims adjusters, are able to access the information, take action, and serve the needs of the customer. So again, we're starting to see this stuff happening. You hopefully saw some examples of how the industry is shifting towards from technology towards applications. You're starting to see some examples of how vendors are moving in that direction. You're starting to hear some customer commentary about the business value. I wanted to close off as we sort of come to the end of this, bit of an eye chart, but again, I'll share the slides out later, and many of you might be familiar with this. This is Gartner's business value model. It is similar in nature to Cheryl's five information governance or 5 management drivers, in that it talks to business value. This is much more complicated, much more robust. There are some trade-offs, but again, it's available in the presentation. And what this tries to do is look at, across an organization, it looks at, in their mind, quote unquote, all the different areas that you can benefit a company. How do you drive performance? So they break it down into demand, supply, and support, and they break it into a number of different areas. But essentially, the point of this chart gets into the idea that you can pick any one of these and align your goals, your practices, your deliverables. So if you think about it, I'll just pick randomly, you might look at order fill rate. How do we start thinking about how information governance might support order fill rate? Okay, well, you could think about it. There's information that it has to go into an order. How do I get access to that? How do I find the old orders? How do I get the new? There's lots of stories. Where's a fun one? Skills inventory index. I have no idea. I'm assuming that's an HR type thing. Skills inventory. Maybe it links to resume. Maybe it links to training trials. It's going to link to content and information. So how do you start to plug your information governance skill set, your information governance capabilities, your IG tools, your IG resources? How do you plug that in to the business users? I throw at you that you want to start thinking about things like the Gartner business value model, things like Forrester's five drivers, and start plugging in your conversations into their kind of goals and objectives. Because ultimately, that's the only way that we're going to start to see a shift in the industry. So the question is, how do we place IG across the board into all these different business areas? So just as we close off a few quick comments on sort of what we might take in terms of how we really move this stuff from the backroom to the boardroom. So first, I jokingly offer, get an MBA. Anyone have an MBA, by the way? There might be a few. Okay. And I don't literally mean go out and spend $60,000 in 2 years of your life or whatever it is these days. There's a smiley face. Go read a book, take a course, do an online thing, download a SlideShare, whatever. Get some business content. Start to think about, read the Gartner business value model. Start to think in their words, think in their terms. And the reason I comment, they're not going to get their CRM or CIPs or whatever designation you like. They're not going to attend the next InfoGovCon. They should, but they don't. Right? So how do we start to get on their page? I throw you augment your committees. The joke about never eat alone. So this is not just literally building out your information governance committee and getting the stakeholders. This is going for lunch with the VP of marketing, hanging out with a sales guy for a day, joining a sales. How many of you have been on a sales call with any of your sales reps? Cool. It's a really, I find it a really interesting experience always to go out in the field. Things change. You start to have just a very different sense of how things happen in real life and how they use your information. Understand the 5 whys. If you haven't heard this concept, it's sort of this idea of drilling deeper and deeper. And do this with your vendors, do this with your stakeholders, do this to yourself. But it's this idea of, looking back at some of those case studies, we need to OCR the information. Well, why? Oh, so that we can put it into Watson. Well, why? Right? So you keep asking why, and eventually the theory is that after 5, you get to the real answer, which is, oh, right, our business was reducing by 10% and we're losing sales every quarter. That's the why. So that changes the discussion point. It also, by the way, doubles your budget, doubles your career prospects, it doubles their interest, et cetera, et cetera. We talked a little bit about big data dreams versus small content solutions, and I'm trying to come up with better words for that, but even Forrester echoed that kind of idea that big data, it's there and it's critical and we should be pursuing it. It's interesting and lots of companies are doing stuff. But I throw at you, there may be an opportunity to look at smaller content-driven solutions. If you could help your company, we have a customer right now, we're doing some contract intelligence work, and it's really about finding the contracts that are greater than or less than $1 million. Now, that's not big data analytics, that's just a really simple question, but it could be really, really critical. Can you find me all the contracts that don't have a signature? That's interesting. I mean, that's powerful stuff. If I could tell you that, if I could give those to you, you could go out and get them signed. Right? Things like that where, yes, there's analytics to it. It might be file analytics, it might be data analytics, it might just be business intelligence. But I throw at you that sometimes we go after the big fish, and a lot of chief data officers, CISOs, they're going after these big data dreams versus maybe the small content realities. And I throw at you finally, certainly challenge your vendors and challenge yourself. Challenge yourselves in terms of how are you taking the message back to your organizations? How are you pitching yourselves? How are you pitching these opportunities? How are you positioning the value of information governance? So hopefully that gives you some sense of some interesting things that I've been seeing over the last few conferences and certainly over the last few research reports that I've been reading. It's by no means to suggest that we are failing. Hopefully you get a sense of the optimism and the change that we're starting to see in the organization as people start to look at information governance more and more holistically and start to position themselves increasingly around business value. So with that, I thank you very much for your time. I think I'm 2 minutes over, but hopefully we're pretty darn close. Lee's giving me a nod, so I'll leave it at that. I'm available certainly at the booth, certainly for the rest of the day, and certainly in the roundtable area, I guess, following this. So thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the day.